Now to the UK, where a group of 50 climate activists from the group Extinction Rebellion are staging a protest in and around the Houses of Parliament in central London. It's a protest that's extended into the heart of Parliament, the House of Commons debating chamber. Here they are. They say 3 people booked on an official tour of the building and then glued themselves in a chain around the Speaker's chair. The campaign group posted this photo on Twitter showing the 3 members hand in hand in front of the seat while 2 other members hold up signs. It comes as Conservative Party members are casting their vote for either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak to be their next leader and Prime Minister. The result will be announced on Monday. Well, let's now bring our UK political correspondent into the discussion, Rob Watson. Rob, I mean, the immediate response really is, how on earth was this allowed to happen?
Well, I guess I would say, Tanya, that it would be extremely unlikely that it could have happened while the politicians were there, while Parliament wasn't in recess, because I can tell you, as someone who's hung around there so often, I mean, normally the chamber would have MPs in, and at the entrance there to the chamber opposite the Speaker's chair, you'd have lots of officials, you'd have policemen, so it would be kind of tricky. But I can tell you, Tanya, when Parliament is in recess, and whether you're someone like me with a parliamentary pass, who can bring in sort of friends, relatives, visitors, or if you're on an official tour, well, you could sort of see how it might happen, because there aren't lots of policemen there at the entrance to the chamber. And I suppose if you really wanted to bound off, you could, as these people have done.
Meanwhile, of course, other questions that UK Parliament will be answering is who will be the next Prime Minister. And that particular race is entering its very final stages.
It certainly is. And I think there are an awful lot of Conservatives who are thinking to themselves, maybe it would have been smarter to do it rather more quickly than they have done. But absolutely, we'll know who the new Conservative leader is at 12:30 on Monday. And then on Tuesday, that person will become Prime Minister, because it will involve the sitting Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, officially resigning in front of the Queen, and then the new Prime Minister getting the Queen's official blessing or appointment, if you like. And I don't think there's any doubt, Tanya, that an awful lot of people in this country and around the world will be thinking, why on earth would anyone want this job? Because I got to say, in 30 odd years of reporting on and off on British politics, it's difficult to think of someone coming into the job at a more difficult time. Worst inflation in the G7, recession forecast, and of course divisions within the governing Conservative Party, energy crisis, you name it, Tanya, it's there.
It's a difficult job. Thank you very much indeed, Rob Watson.
Well, meantime, new emails obtained by Fox News show first son Hunter Biden helped arrange a dinner at the Chinese embassy for a client of his former investment company. This was back in 2011, mind you. Those emails also show Hunter helped arrange that dinner after networking with a top Beijing official at a luncheon hosted by his father, then Vice President Joe Biden. The client, who's also a Democratic donor, writing, quoting here, "I just talked to Hunter and he said he sat with the number 3 official at the embassy today at lunch and has contact information to follow up after the Chinese president has left the U.S. John Levine is a reporter for the New York Post. He joins us now. The Chinese president, of course, at the time was Hu Jintao. He was at this luncheon, right? And Barbara Streisand is there, and John Kerry is there, and Hunter Biden's at this table with the number 3 guy in the Chinese embassy. And suddenly, you know, one of his big wealthy clients gets a dinner at the Chinese embassy. I mean, this is clearly peddling, you know, some political goods.
Right. I mean, it just boggles the mind that Hunter Biden would have these high-level contacts within the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party. You know, it can't be stressed enough that during much of the period the laptop covers, he was addicted to crack cocaine and an alcoholic. Right. And, you know, if you read his autobiography, there were times when he was just snorting drugs off the carpets of the hotels he was staying in. So what interest would top Chinese officials, why would the number 3 person in the embassy be sitting next to him, if not to get access to his father?
And that's the big question is what were they looking for? I mean, this whole concept of Joe Biden saying, I never had any conversations with my son about any of his business dealings has now been proven false.
Right, repeatedly debunked.
And yet this laptop still, the media hasn't really picked this up as a major story.
Yeah, well, there's clearly unanswered questions about what President Biden's involvement was with his son and with China and the businesses. Right. We know that in the laptop he's referred to as the big guy, and we know that many, many entities, not just Chinese, but also Russian, but also from Kazakhstan, also Mexico, Romania, they all coalesced around Hunter because they wanted access to his father. And what access was ultimately granted remains an open question.
So we jump ahead 3 years, and in 2014, Hunter's uncle, Jack Owens, reaches out to Hunter to help him get a business license for his telemedicine company in China. And he says the following, quoting here, "Time pressure is very tight, plus the fact that we do not yet have one," meaning the license, "has caused a slight credibility bump in the company's mind. This all translates into a need for a business license and one secured very quickly." And you say, why is the uncle going to Hunter Biden to get a business license for his company in China?
Right. And I think it's important to remember how in China, family relations and government politics are totally intertwined. And if you look at the leaders of China today, they're the children and the grandchildren of the founding Communist Party leaders. So it's very natural over there that if you want something done here, you work with the son of the leader or the family of the leader. It's part of a very long tradition. And you'll notice how in the countries he was working in, they're not Finland, it's not England, it's China, it's Russia, it's Kazakhstan, it's places that don't necessarily have the best rule of law or where corruption and family connections matter more.
John Levine, great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
For more, we bring in ABC News investigative reporter Catherine Falders. She is also in West Palm Beach. Catherine, before we get to the latest on the investigations, former White House counsel Pat Cipollone, his former deputy Patrick Philbin, expected to appear today before a grand jury in Washington, D.C., one that is investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. What do we know about that and what those two lawyers are likely to say?
Well, look, our producers out there caught Pat Cipollone arriving with his attorney this morning. They were asking him questions. Are there any questions that he wasn't going to answer? He was silent on all of that. But look, the reality is that Pat Cipollone and his deputy were two of the most senior Trump officials to have appeared before the grand jury. We know that staffers to former Vice President Mike Pence have also spoken. Pence's former top White House lawyer, along with his chief of staff. Cipollone was there in the end days of the Trump administration. He was one of the only few advisors that were there, including the former chief of staff, Mark Meadows. He was advising the former president that what he was saying, whether it be marching to the Capitol, attempts to overturn the election, and listing these outside legal advisors, that he could face legal jeopardy for this. Cipollone was telling a lot of his staffers not to be in meetings with Trump. He didn't want anybody to face any legal liability here. So he has a window into a lot of Trump's decision-making, what he was advising, and then what outside lawyers were essentially telling Trump to do at the time. That includes, for example, the fake electors that we've heard lots about that Trump was communicating with. So there really isn't a person who has more insight into the decision-making the last days of the Trump administration than Pat Cipollone and his deputy.
Catherine, question of the day for the special master. What do you think is going to happen? There are arguments, of course, for allowing this, arguments against it. What are you hearing?
Look, your guess is as good as mine here, but I was in court yesterday, and the indication from the judge was that she was leaning towards appointing a special master in some way. But I've been talking to a lot of sources and legal experts who are guessing in a way that this could be more narrowly tailored. She said that if she does appoint a special counsel, she indicated that it's not going to affect the intelligence community's assessment, a damage assessment of these documents. So in terms of when this ruling comes, she said in due course, but we could expect something any minute. Over the weekend, potentially next week as well. We're also waiting for additional documents to be unsealed. We know that the Department of Justice has provided a more in-depth property receipt, if you will, of the documents that were seized from Maralago. We're expecting that to be unsealed at some point, either today or over the weekend or next week as well.
So timing. Okay, Catherine, what comes next?
Yeah, look, so obviously what comes next, of course, is the ruling, the special master ruling. Look, we do expect her to potentially move quickly here. I don't think we're going to wait for for 2 weeks. So this comes next. And then depending what it says, DOJ indicated in court that they could appeal this. So it could be caught up in the courts for some time. We could be back here at the district court here in West Palm Beach. But I think what the lawyers want to do on the DOJ side is at least review that ruling. But as of right now, they're digging through the documents, and the investigation hasn't stopped, and the judge hasn't ordered that DOJ investigators cease reviewing these documents, at least not yet.
Catherine, thank you very much. Catherine Faulders.
As we've been reporting, the DOJ unsealed a detailed inventory list of the items seized in the FBI search of Maralago. CBS News' Catherine Herridge has a new interview with former National Security Advisor John Bolton about the Justice Department's ongoing investigation. Here's a preview.
What are the national security implications of the commingling of these records?
Well, to the extent that the newspaper clippings were treated like most people in this country would treat newspaper clippings, it shows a real disdain for the seriousness of the classification at issue. In most offices, you would have a very clear segregation of the sensitive classified material locked in safes, handled very carefully, versus all the unclassified material. This, to me, is more evidence that Donald Trump didn't give much attention to the sensitivity of the classified information.
You can watch more of Catherine's interview with John Bolton right here on CBS News at 7 p.m. Eastern. They discuss former President Trump's handling of classified documents and his experience working at Mar-a-Lago.